Hey everyone, Varric here. So this video is going to be on heroic twin consorts. Now, for the most part, this fight is really pretty similar to normal mode, even more so than some of the other fights that I've gone over. There's really not a whole lot of difference, even on heroic mode. There are a couple of different mechanics, but overall the fight really is pretty much the same. You're still going to be dealing with Lulin during the first phase, and of course it still lasts 3 minutes. The second phase you'll be dealing with Suin. It also still lasts 3 minutes. Third phase you're still going to be dealing with both of the twins, and of course the fourth phase will be dependent on whoever's left up out of the twins for the final phase. They still more or less cast the same abilities. Obviously on heroic they do more damage. There are slight subtle differences on some of them, but again for the most part they're still the same. Now, real quick before we get started, as far as hunter specifics go, there's really nothing you need to really change, or any talents or glyphs that we really need to specify on this fight. This fight, again, behaves pretty similar to normal, so whatever you used on normal will pretty much carry over to heroic. However, before we get started, I should say that a good gauge of whether you're kind of ready for this fight or if you have a good chance of getting a kill is by the end of the first phase. If Lulin is not down right at or preferably below 40% HP, you may not have enough in the tank to get this fight down. It's very, very important that Lulin is down at least at or below 40% before you hit the second phase. This fight is pretty tight for DPS. Again, it's a pretty good DPS check. So if you keep hitting the second phase with Lulin around 45 to 50% HP, you may not be able to get the kill, and it may just be out of reach for you at the moment. You may have to just get some more gear and then come back later. So just keep that in mind. Now, before I get into the actual differences and the new mechanics, I'm just going to go over real quick some of the same abilities that are going to carry over from normal to heroic. Now, again, as just like on normal, the first phase is going to start with Lulin. She's still going to be casting her Cosmic Barrage, so just make sure you stay spread out. This does quite a bit of damage on heroic, so you definitely don't want to be clumped up. She'll also still be casting her Moon Lotus around the edges of the room, and these Moon Lotuses still will be spewing out the green mist, so make sure you don't get hit by it, as it still will stun you for 5 seconds. It also will do a little bit more damage to you as you're stunned, so you definitely don't want to get hit with that, and then get nailed by a Cosmic Barrage, as it'll probably wipe you. Suin will still pop in, casting Tears of the Sun. However, there is a slight twist to this, but I'll cover that in a minute. Now, once 3 minutes are up, you will hit the second phase, in which case you'll be dealing with Suin. She still will gain her Blazing Radiant stack. Blazing Radiant stacks. So it's still very important that your tanks drag her over to the comms to keep those in check. She also will still be casting her Light of Day, so again, you still want to stay spread out to keep the damage down. She still will also randomly charge somebody and knock them back, and then, of course, as she's heading back towards the tank, she will leave the little flame patch on the ground. She does cast a new ability during this phase, and I'll cover that in a minute. Now, again, once 3 minutes are up, you'll move into the third phase, which is the Dusk phase. You will also still be dealing with both twins during this phase, just like on normal. They will also lose a few abilities, but they will also gain new ones. Lulin will stop casting Cosmic Barrage during this phase, but she will gain the new Tidal Wave ability. It still behaves the same way as it does on normal. It still will do a ton of damage if you get hit by these waves. And she is also still invulnerable while she's casting this ability. Suin will stop casting Light of Day. But however, she still will be gaining Blazing Radiant stacks, so make sure your tanks are still dragging her to the comets. And again, you still have to be dealing with her new ability for this particular heroic mode. And then, of course, the fourth phase will start whenever one of the twins dies, and you'll be dealing with whichever one you decide to leave up. However, on heroic, it's probably going to be impossible to leave Suin alive for the final phase, as with her new added mechanic, without the comets to mitigate the damage, you're pretty much going to wipe. So it's definitely very, very important that you kill Suin as fast as you can, so you have just Lulin up for the final phase. But that's pretty much the same, like I said, overall strat is it will still work on from normal to heroic. Now, the new mechanics you're going to have to deal with will start in Phase 1. Um, in Phase 1, you're going to be dealing with a new ad called Lurkers of the Night. Um, at first, these ads are invisible, and they generally will be on the outer edges or the corners of the room. You won't be able to see them, but they still will be able to cast basically these little shadow bolt abilities on the raid. Overall, they're not really that damaging. However, if they decide to focus on one person, especially if 3 or 4 of them decide to cast on one person, it can get very painful, especially if they get hit with a Cosmic Barrage during this. So it's a good chance somebody could go down if it's just unlucky enough to get focused with this. Now, the way you handle these ads is when Suin pops in and casts Tears of the Sun. You either need to have your tank, or if you decide to assign somebody to pull Suin basically around the room over these lurkers while she's casting Tears of the Sun. When these ads get hit by this ability, they will become visible, and they will behave just like any normal ad would. You can attack them. They have this normal aggro table. So depending on whether you decide to have somebody grab them and pull them over to the middle to kind of AoE them down, or in our case we had a prop paladin where his just AoE threat was pretty much enough to pull all of them to the middle anyway. And then of course the melee cleave, and then anybody that threw AoE damage on them, they went down. They don't have a ton of life, so once they get focused with any kind of AoE damage, they go down pretty quickly. For us, they really weren't much of an issue. They really just didn't change that phase really overall, other than just having the second tank, in our case the second tank, dragging her around the room to pick up the ads. I should mention though that you definitely, like as I said earlier, you want to be able to push her below 40%. And just like on normal, you're probably going to end up using the Celestials during certain parts of the fight. And I'll go over at the end of the video, I'll go over kind of the strat to use, when to use these particular Celestials at what time. For us, because the first phase overall is not really healer intensive, it's probably recommended that you have one of your healers do the painting for the Celestials when you decide to call them out, as you don't want to take one of your DPS away from damaging Lu Lin, because it becomes very, very tight later in the fight. But again, once 3 minutes are up, you move into the second phase, which is the daylight phase, and you'll be dealing with Suin. And just like I said earlier, she still will cast all her normal abilities. The new mechanic that she will start to use is called a casting ability called Nuclear Inferno. She will roughly cast this, I believe it's every 60 seconds. And this is a chain cast where she will cast it for roughly, I believe, 8 seconds or so. And this is a raid-wide fire damage, and it does a tremendous amount of damage. Usually after 3 or 4 seconds, you'll die from this ability. The only way to really to handle this ability is to hide behind one of the ice comets when Lu Lin pops out. You usually, just like with anything else, DBM will give you a warning when she's getting ready to cast Nuclear Inferno, in which case you need to run behind one of the comets and stand there until she's done casting. Also keep in mind that while she's casting Nuclear Inferno, she cannot be damaged, so don't bother attacking while she's casting this ability. The tricky part of this, and probably the worst part of this whole phase, is the start of the phase. The reason being is Lu Lin will generally only drop one comet down at the start, and it's still very important that your tanks drag her over, Suin over to these comets to keep her blazing radiant stacks down. The problem is, we seem to find out, especially on a few of our attempts, that Lu Lin was kind of slow in dropping the second comet. And sometimes we got caught, at least for the first few seconds of the Nuclear Inferno, without a comet to hide behind. We were taking the full brunt of the damage, which was kind of rough. It wasn't all the time. Sometimes the second comet got down fast enough when we didn't have an issue. Other times it just seemed to be where Lu Lin was a little slow in putting down the second comet. However, once you get through the first Nuclear Inferno, the rest of this phase becomes pretty simple, as usually Lu Lin becomes pretty good about casting a lot of the comets down, so you should always have a comet to hide behind. It should never become an issue. It's still very important to make sure you're not standing near the comets unless a Nuclear Inferno is getting ready to go off, as if you get hit with the Light of Day ability and the comet takes damage, it won't be up for when the Nuclear Inferno goes off, or even if it's up, it will disappear during the middle of her cast. So you definitely don't want at least one of the comets up to be taking any more damage than necessary. Ideally, you're going to have a couple of comets up. Your tanks are going to be dragging it to one of, excuse me, your tanks are going to be dragging Sue-In to one of these comets to keep her blazing radiant stacks down. And of course, once she starts casting Nuclear Inferno, you want to hide behind the other comet to mitigate the damage. Once the Nuclear Inferno is over, again, you want to spread back out and then just repeat and keep attacking her until the 3 minutes is up, and then you move into the third phase. Now, with the third phase, you're still going to be dealing with both of the twins at the same time. However, just like on normal, they will lose a couple of their abilities that they were doing during their normal phases. Lulin will no longer cast Cosmic Barrage. However, she will gain her new ability, Tidal Wave, so it's definitely very important that you try to dodge these as much as you can. They do come out kind of quick. Really, the only way to actively dodge these is if you use the Tiger Celestial to slow time, in which case it will slow the waves down enough to where you should be able to dodge them without a problem. Otherwise, you just have to get lucky and not be standing really in the way, or if you're really quick on the trigger, you might be able to run out of the way if you're far enough away from her. Oliver, Sue-In will still be casting Nuclear Inferno during this phase, so you're also going to have to be dealing with that ability as well. It's still very important that you burn Sue-In down as quickly as you can. You're definitely not going to want to deal with Sue-In in the final phase. There's really probably no way to survive the Nuclear Inferno, at least right at the start of your first few kills, without a comet to mitigate the damage. It's just not really possible right now. So you definitely want to burn her down as quickly as possible. A good gauge of this is usually if Sue-In's not dead before the third tidal wave goes out from Lulin, you're probably a bit behind and you may not make it before the Enrage, so just keep that in mind. Now, once Sue-In goes down in the third phase and you enter the final phase, which in this case would be a darkness phase, you should be pretty much on your way to a kill. You're still going to have to deal with probably another tidal wave or two, maybe. And again, you just want to stay spread out for the Cosmic Barrage. Again, she'll gain all her abilities from the first phase. The ads are really not going to be an issue, even without having them be, invisible. Or excuse me, to become visible without Sue-In. You're really not going to be worrying about them too much in this phase. But that's pretty much it. Once you get Sue-In down a third and you enter the fourth phase, you should be on your way to a kill. Now, as far as the Celestial use during the fight, there are some key moments that you want to use certain ones. And then the other ones are kind of going to be up to you, just kind of when you decide to use them. During the first phase, you probably would want to use the Tiger Celestial to maybe slow her Cosmic Barrage down, especially the first one, just to kind of help mitigate the damage. Also, you probably want to use the Ox Celestial towards the end of the first phase to kind of set yourself up for the second phase. It increases the maximum health of everybody. So you definitely want to go into the second phase with that up if you can. You probably also want to use the Dragon Celestial Serpent Vitality. Probably during one of the, more than likely, probably the second Nuclear Inferno. As they will start to regenerate more health, obviously, when that goes off. Also, it's probably important to cast the Tiger Celestial during her first Inferno, as it will usually keep her from pulsing. Usually I think it's like 7 or 8 pulses of this Inferno Blast. And when you use the Tiger Celestial slow time, I believe it's down to 4. So it does definitely help if you time it. But again, the timing has to be kind of exact. And this is just going to take some practice on whoever's painting to know when to start this particular Celestial. It's also definitely very important to use the Chi-Ji during the daylight phase to help burn her down as quickly as possible. Should also mention too, during the daylight phase at the start, you're probably when you're going to use your Heroism and Bloodlust, as Sue-In needs to take as much damage as possible during this phase and into the third phase. You definitely don't want to have the third phase drag out for very long. So again, you don't want to be using all your initial big cooldowns in the first phase, although it is very important to get Lulin down It's also just about as equally, if not more important, that you get Suin down as low as you can and going into the third phase. So I highly recommend saving your Heroism or Bloodlust until the start of the second phase before the first Inferno goes out. Um, Again, as the third phase, as far as Celestial use goes, you definitely probably want to use the Tiger Celestial slow time during the first tidal wave. And then, of course, you can just use the Chi-Ji to do the damage overall, as long as they're not casting Inferno or Tidal Wave, because, of course, they'll be immune to the damage. And as far as the others go, you'll just have to kind of pick and choose when you decide to use these. But just real quick, first phase, stay spread out. Whatever you decide, whether it's a tank or somebody else dragging Suin around to pick up the ads. If you don't have a prop paladin or somebody that has a high AoE threat to drag them to the middle, just have somebody pick them up once they become visible and just AoE them down. Stay away from the Moon Lotuses. Make sure you don't get put to sleep. And try to get her down to as close or below as 40% as you can get. Second phase, you want to blow all your cooldowns before she gets the first Nuclear Inferno off. Make sure you have at least one comet up, or whether it's the second one she puts out to hide behind for the Nuclear Inferno. And then, of course, after that, you just want to stay spread out and try to group up before she starts casting Nuclear Inferno to get it behind a comet. And make sure your tanks are dragging her to the other comets to keep the Blazing Radiant stacks in check. Third phase, just burn Suin as much as you can. Try to get her down before the third tidal wave goes out from Lulin. Again, group up when she casts Nuclear Inferno, get behind a comet. Try to dodge the tidal waves from Lulin if you can, although this is kind of tricky, unless you have the time slowed ability, and in which case you should be able to dodge those without a problem. Once Suin goes down, again, really just the only real big worry is this thing spread out for Cosmic Barrage, not getting hit with the green mist, and trying to dodge another tidal wave if that should happen. But that's pretty much the fight. Again, as far as the difference between normal and heroic is not that great. However, it still is a very steep DPS check. So this will be a good check for your raid as far as overall DPS. If you're not quite there, you may again just have to go gear up a little bit more and then come back and try it. Hopefully, though, this video was helpful. If I did forget anything or if I left something out, just let me know down in the comments down below and I'll address it. But as always, I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you later.